We get more than 2,000 likes at this videos, we will upload more patriotic news. Coates says he intends to try to get some details on Sessions' report. Aspen, Colorado, U.S. Director of National Intelligence Daniel Coates said Friday that he intends to try to get some details about a media report alleging that Attorney General Jeff Sessions discussed campaign-related matters, including policy issues important to Moscow, with Russia's ambassador to the United States during the 2016 presidential race. The Washington Post reported Friday that Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak told his superiors in Moscow that he discussed those issues with Sessions during the campaign when he was serving as a top foreign policy advisor to Republican candidate Donald Trump. Kislyak's accounts of two conversations with Sessions were intercepted by U.S. spy agencies, which monitor the communications of senior Russian officials both in the United States and in Russia, the Post reported. It also noted that Sessions initially failed to disclose his contacts with Kislyak, that he then denied that the meetings were about the Trump campaign, and that he has testified that he has no recollection of such an encounter last April. One U.S. official told the Post said that Sessions has provided misleading statements that are contradicted by other evidence. And it reported that a former official said that the intelligence indicates that Sessions and Kislyak had substantive discussions on matters including Trump's positions on Russia-related issues and prospects for U.S.-Russia relations in a Trump administration. Sessions has repeatedly denied discussing campaign-related issues with Russian officials, and that the meetings with Kislyak were specifically in his capacity as a U.S. Senator. As DNI Director, Coates oversees the National Security Agency and other intelligence agencies that would have conducted any intercepts like those the Post reported. Asked about the report during a panel at the Aspen Security Forum here, Coates said, "I just learned about it. Also, I saw the headline. I have come to the point where I no longer put any stock in headlines or breaking news." But, Coates continued in a somewhat disjointed response, "I tell my friends, and if I was talking to the nation, which I don't, I would say. Actually, my wife encouraged me to read this thing and, to, ask a question before you take something as truth. So I'm going to ask, is this for real? Is this the real thing? Try to get some details before I draw a conclusion. And I try to do that with everything." Coates also said there is no dissent within U.S. intelligence agencies about the publicly announced conclusion that Russia meddled in the election through hacking and fake news stories. The comment put him at odds with Trump, who has repeatedly cased out on the veracity and legitimacy of those findings. Kushner reports millions in 77 previously emitted assets. Senior White House advisor and son-in-law to President Donald Trump Jared Kushner reported 77 undisclosed assets and more than an additional $10 million in previously unreported holdings, according to revised financial documents filed Friday, which his legal team said were inadvertently omitted from prior financial disclosure filings. The Office of Government and Ethics certified the updated financial disclosures listing the unreported assets and holdings as a part of an ordinary review process, according to the filings. Kushner's newly reported disclosures revealed that he had sold interest in a New Jersey mall, that he no longer had stake in a company with interest in an Ohio property, that he had a stake worth between $5 to $25 million in a holding company that owned an online real estate investment platform named Cadre, and that he owned artwork ranging in worth from $5 million to $25 million. His wife, first daughter Ivanka Trump, meanwhile, disclosed assets worth at least $66 million and an income of at least $13.5 million from last year in separate documents filed Friday. While initial filings showed the couple together held between $240 million and $740 million, the new disclosures show the range to fall between $206 million and $760 million. Jared and Ivanka have followed each of the required steps in their transition from private citizens to federal officials, the couple's lawyer, Jamie Gorelick, said in a statement. The filings by Trump were her first since accepting an official role within the administration in late March, whereas Kushner was tapped as senior advisor prior to President Donald Trump's inauguration. Ivanka's financial disclosure form is still in the pre-certification stage, as she began the process later, Gorlick had. McConnell's last-ditch Obamacare strategy. Talking is no longer working. It's time to vote. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is taking the rare step of forcing his members to take a tough vote on an Obamacare repeal bill, H.R. 1628, 115, that is on track to fail, making them own their votes. Senior Senate Republicans believe the high-profile vote expected Tuesday, followed by conservative backlash over the GOP's failure to fulfill its 7-year campaign pledge, might provoke enough heat from the base to bring senators back to the negotiating table. It seems like a long shot. But McConnell may be playing the long game, making his members walk the plank not as an act of desperation but as part of a strategy that just might work. He's used it before to get what he wants. If the vote fails, I don't think it's over, said Senator John Thune, RS.D., a member of the Senate leadership. We're going to need a little longer runway to get to 50 votes on something. Even if we fail on the procedural vote next week, Thune added, all that really does is say okay, we'll regroup and then take another run at this. Senator Rand Paul, RK, who has been demanding McConnell hold a vote on a repeal-only bill, agrees. We can do this for quite a while, he said. McConnell has used this approach before. In May 2015 he forced multiple votes that ultimately granted then-President Barack Obama fast-track trade powers during negotiation of a massive Pacific Rim trade deal. This time, the vote comes after months of discussion on repeal legislation that hasn't garnered support from 50 senators. If the strategy doesn't bring senators back to the table, the vote could demarcate a decisive end to at least the public Obamacare repeal debate for some time. That would allow the Senate, which has already spent 2 months trying to dismantle and replace the health law, to move on and notch some legislative wins. Many are more than ready to turn to other priorities, like tax reform. Still, holding a doomed vote is unusual for McConnell, who typically goes to great lengths to protect his members from politically difficult votes. Everybody has to be held personally accountable, said Senator John Cornyn, R. Texas, who has been furiously whipping the repeal effort. Everybody is a good enough politician that if they've got a reason to justify their vote, they'll be able to sell that. The vote Tuesday will be to start debate on Obamacare repeal. But it is unclear as of now which bill would serve as the actual policy, an extremely unusual move. McConnell said earlier this week the Senate would vote on a repeat of a 2015 bill that repealed much of the health care law. Since then, senators have floated the idea of voting on multiple options, including repeal, the Senate's repeal and replace measure or a combination of these and other policies. That would be moot if the Senate doesn't even vote to start debate. With at least 2 senators having announced they would oppose proceeding to the bill, and the expected absence of Senator John McCain, R. Arizona, who was diagnosed with a brain tumor, the vote is likely to fail without major last-minute changes. Leaders have opened the door to the idea that if the margin is narrow, they could vote again when McCain could return to Washington. Given his diagnosis, it's not clear when that could happen. Senate Republicans have other reasons to stop the political bleeding over repeal. They want to move on to tax reform, but they also have health care bills that must pass in the coming months, including renewing the Children's Health Insurance Program and a pivotal FDA funding program. The Obamacare debacle could affect those other bills. The decision to hold a vote, versus just pulling the bill from the floor without forcing members to go on the record, will be more difficult for some senators than others. It could be the biggest liability for Republicans who supported a 2015 repeal bill, which Obama vetoed, and now won't support the same measure. All Republicans currently in office besides Senator Susan Collins of Maine supported it. We're going to find out if there's hypocrisy in the United States Senate in the next few days, said Senator David Perdue, R. Georgia. I don't believe in situational ethics. So if you thought it was a good idea to repeal when we had a president that probably would not have accepted it, what's wrong with repealing it now when we have a president who would sign it into law? Senator Shelley Moore Capito, R.W.V., who is not up for re-election until 2020 in a conservative state, argued that circumstances have changed since she voted to repeal the law in 2015 and that she would hope voters understand her argument. For instance, expanded Medicaid has played a big role in combating the opiate epidemic in her state. People's minds change and circumstances change, Cahito said. And as time goes on, that's what's happened, and I gotta do what I think is the right thing to do. She doesn't want to vote on a repeal until she sees a replacement measure for the Affordable Care Act. Senator Jeff Flake, of Arizona, who may face a competitive re-election bid next year, dismissed suggestions that voting for a straight repeal of the 2010 health care law could hurt his prospects. "I've already voted on it. I'm fine with it," Flake said in an interview. "All I can say is, if it comes up, I'll vote for it. There have been so many votes on this over the years that if your opponents want to paint you one way or another, there's lots of fodder they can." Trump blames intelligence leak for damaging report on Sessions. President Donald Trump railed against the latest damaging report about his administration, tweeting on Saturday morning that the illegal leaks like the one he said was behind a Washington Post article must end. The Post reported late Friday that Attorney General Jeff Sessions had discussed campaign-related matters with the Russian ambassador during the election, seemingly contradicting Sessions' claim that no such issues were discussed. The article cites current and U.S. officials who were familiar with U.S. intelligence intercepts. A new intelligence leak from the Amazon Washington Post, this time against AG Jeff Sessions. "These illegal leaks, like Comey's, must stop," Trump tweeted. The tweet came amid fresh tension between Trump and Sessions, after the president earlier this week heavily criticized his attorney general in a New York Times interview for recusing himself from the FBI's Russia probe. The White House has since said Trump has confidence in Sessions, and Sessions said he has no current plans to step down. Trump on Saturday morning also rebuked the Times for its coverage of ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The failing New York Times foiled U.S. attempt to kill the single most wanted terrorist, al-Baghdadi, the president tweeted. Trump went on to pan the Times for their sick agenda over national security in a seemingly unfinished train of thought. Though it is initially unclear which report Trump was alluding to, the Times reported late Friday that Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis told reporters at the Pentagon that al-Baghdadi was still alive, adding, "I'll believe otherwise when we know we have killed him. We are going after him." A New York Times spokesperson told Politico that the news organization has asked the White House to clarify the president's tweet. "We have asked the White House to clarify the tweet. If the president is referring to this 2015 story, the Pentagon raised no objections with the Times before publishing the story in 2015 and no senior American official ever complained publicly about it until now," as noted in Peter Baker's story this morning, a Times spokesperson said. The on-the-record remarks were widely reported by other news outlets as well. The president has frequently spoken out against damaging reports in the press dating back to the 2016 presidential race, bashing outlets for reporting on the so-called illegal leaks. The Times, which Trump has repeatedly derided as the failing New York Times, has been a target of choice for the president. In October of 2016, Trump's legal team threatened to sue the publication over its reporting of sexual harassment allegations from several women. Trump at other times has alluded to potential libel lawsuits against news outlets. Oregon Senator Wayne Morse dies at 73, July 22, 1974. On this day in 1974, Wayne Morse, a maverick senator from Oregon for 24 years who thrived on controversy, died at age 73 while campaigning as the Democratic nominee to regain the seat he had narrowly lost to Republican Senator Bob Packwood in 1968. In 1944, despite his progressive views, Morse won a Senate seat as a Republican. He broke party ranks in 1952 over Dwight Eisenhower's choice of Richard Nixon as his running mate and became an independent. He still caucused with the GOP, however, which at the time held a razor-thin Senate majority after Eisenhower's presidential victory. When the new Congress convened in 1953, party leaders punished Morse for his defection by stripping him of his seniority and his seats on the Armed Services and Labor Committees. He had arrived at the opening session with a folding chair and said, "Since I haven't been given any seat in the new Senate, I decided to bring my own." Later that year, Morse staged a filibuster against Tideland's oil legislation for 22 hours, which held the record until South Carolina Senator Strom Thurmond, another maverick, broke it in 1957 by 2 hours. In 1955, Morse became a Democrat, giving the party a one-vote Senate margin. Senator Lyndon B. Johnson, D. Texas, the new majority leader, rewarded Morse by restoring his seniority and offering him his choice of committee assignments. He chose banking and foreign relations. With LBJ in the White House, Morse, a resolute critic of the Vietnam War, became one of 2 senators in 1964 to oppose the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, an act of political defiance that probably ultimately cost him his Senate seat. An exasperated LBJ privately quipped to a reporter, "You can lead a Morse to water, but you can't make him think." It was a mean-spirited remark. Johnson knew that Morse had been kicked in the head by a horse in 1951. He sustained major injuries. The kick nearly tore his lips off, fractured his jaw in 4 places, knocked out most of his upper teeth, and loosened several others. In 1959, Morse had opposed Eisenhower's nomination of Clara Boothe Luce as ambassador to Brazil. Morse chastised her for having criticized President Franklin D. Roosevelt. After being confirmed by a 79-11 vote, Luce said her troubles with Morse stemmed from the fact that a horse had kicked him. She also remarked that riots in Bolivia might be dealt with by dividing the country up among its neighbors. A backlash against her remarks from Morse and other senators and refusal to retract them led to her resignation 3 days after having been confirmed. Morse composed his own epitaph when he wrote, "As long as I serve on this job, I am going to serve my own master under obligation to no one."